Hi guys, so today we're talking about crowds, and crowds are basically refer to any gathering of lots of people on the same event, same place for a particular reason or a particular action. I think sporting events, I think outdoor markets, I think busy shopping malls, I'm thinking music shows, fairs, anything where loads of people get together in one place. Because what happens then is it is basically a bombardment of the senses. There's lots of visual stimulation because people will have different color or there's different movement that the eyes needs to absorb. There's lots of noises, people making noise, people talking or speaking, which is processing through the auditory system. And then as soon as we go into a crowd, our personal space are kind of being invaded. You can call it like that. That's definitely one group will experience that as invasion. But there's a lot of stimulation that a crowds do bring to the brain. And then there's even smells, if you want to think about it that way. So crowds typically, as I said, is a bombardment of sensory stimulation. And there's a very different approach to how we manage crowds or how we prefer them or not prefer them. So if we understand sensory thresholds and diversity and individuality within sensory thresholds, it becomes very easy to see why people who have got low thresholds, more sensory sensitive, would avoid crowds. They would steer away from them, and if they are exposed to crowds, they often would get overstimulated or irritable, or they might even get anxious. And that's kind of the brain's unconscious way to say, this does not work for me. And as I say, they would have an avoidance or an away response. The other end of the spectrum, we have high threshold people who are sensory seekers. They actually enjoy, thrive, and seek out sensory stimulation, which is typical of a crowd. They would have a towards response. The brain gets activated, gets energized by all of the activity that crowds potentially can provide. And then we've got the group in the middle, our medium thresholds, our sensory neutrals, who's got either or, no real particular preference here. They could do crowds or not do crowds. It doesn't necessarily matter. So just really making us understand that something like going into a crowd or steering from a crowd has often, and very much so, a sensory element to it, which is totally misunderstood, totally not acknowledged, and totally not even come up to the surface of understanding for most of us out there. So the sensory stories are really to share day-to-day stuff with you, which is real, which is really part and parcel of everyday life, but how they are often very much driven by our inherent genetic thresholds, which is part of our DNA and part of our wiring. Your sensory wiring is extremely powerful, and it does help us to understand ourselves, people close to us, family, friends, colleagues, and help us to just be more compassionate and less judging. So hopefully you will look at crowds differently or from a different perspective next time you avoid one or go into it, or doesn't necessarily matter. Just to show the brain is unique and we are unique sensory beings, and which drives a lot of our actions and behavior. That's all for today, guys. Take care, stay safe, and speak to you soon. Cheers.